Hey y'all, this is Jennifer. I was reading the news yesterday, as many of you probably were, and saw the Christianity Today article on sexual harassment went unchecked at Christianity Today. If you're not familiar with Christianity Today, it is basically the largest evangelical Christian publication that I can think of in the US. And so, initially when I thought sexual harassment at Christianity Today, that's, gosh, what happened? And I was not prepared, to be honest, for what I read in the article. And I know that, many of us who have survived abuse, many of us who looked up to Christianity Today are extremely disappointed and disgusted and frustrated right now. I do want to say I'm really grateful that they came out with this article. Daniel Silliman, the author, I hope I'm saying that right. I'm sorry if I'm not. Daniel was incredibly brave in putting together this article, as were his editors and everyone who helped him and supported him in this. And I think just the editorial board made the right decision in being transparent. Of course, as someone with experience in situations like this, we know that often these behaviors, these cultures that enable abuse, they don't just go away when one person leaves. There's a reason why those guys were able to fly under the radar for over a dozen years. And it's not because, obviously they have problems. They have terrible sin problems, but it's not because they're the only problem. And, people will talk about systemic sexism or racism or whatever. And, I wouldn't phrase it like that so much as I think that as human beings, we get acclimated to certain kinds of behavior, to certain norms. It's like being in a dark room. Your eyes acclimate to that darkness. And then when you get out in the light, you're like, oh, whoa, that's bright. And so when people are in an environment where there is sexual harassment, and let's define that. It's not just a matter of saying gross things to women, creepy things to women, touching them on the knee when you really, don't do that. There's an underlying issue of dehumanization, okay? You're not treating people, not thinking of people as being created in the image of God. That's really what it comes down to. It comes down to your theology, not just the theology that you know in your head, right? But the theology that's kind of percolated down into your heart and now is shining through your behavior. All right. So I like to say people are like coffee makers. We have this knowledge in our head, but until it kind of percolates down into our heart and we feel that knowledge and we're passionate about that knowledge and we love Jesus and we want to honor Jesus, and until that happens, that theology, that knowledge in our head is not going to emit out from us. And so that's my concern with this whole thing is like, okay, these guys are no longer at Christianity Today, but then what steps are being taken to kind of reverse this culture, to turn the lights on in the darkness so that your eyes can now become acclimated to the light? Because for so long, and I know this from experience, for so long, we when we're acclimated to darkness, we become used to the darkness and it no longer seems dark to us. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we commit the sin, but it might mean that we don't see the sin, or we don't react to the sin, or we don't call out the sin when we do see it, because to us, we're inundated with it and it appears normal. And so the article states that, and I am probably, again, just going to apologize for all the names I'm about to pronounce wrong. Mark Gali, who was the former editor-in-chief and the advertising director, I'm just going to call him Talk because apparently that was his nickname. But so apparently they had extremely bad behavior. It mentions, let's see, what is it? It mentions everything from rude remarks to basically propositioning women for affairs is what it sounds like. Touching women inappropriately, commenting on women's physical appearance in a sexual manner. And so just very, very, very out of line. And some of this, honestly, I'm not sure even stays under the umbrella of harassment. Some of it, depending on the laws of the state, particularly the touching, that could escalate to, we could be talking about criminal issues here. So anyway, the article says, and this, to me, this is a red flag. The report identified a pair of problems, so two problems, at the flagship magazine of American evangelicalism: a poor process for reporting, investigating, and resolving harassment allegations, and a culture of unconscious sexism that can be, quote, inhospitable to women, end quote. And Christianity Today has made that assessment public. I agree, it makes things very inhospitable to women. Honestly, it makes things as inhospitable to men who are who want to honor women and who love their wives. But primarily the problem I see here is that this makes things inhospitable to Christ. I mean, how can... I recognize that the administration and that many of the writers and the staff, they're strong Christians and they would never do these things. But at the same time, when this kind of sin is going unnoticed or hushed up or ignored, really what we've got, the really root problem, besides all the obvious stuff that the secular world will recognize, is that we are not honoring Christ. And so how can we say that we are ministering, that we are a witness to Christ, if we're not representing Christ in our personal lives? And, this kind of thing permeates out so much. I mean, this is going to permeate out into what they choose to report on, how they handle news stories that involve sexism and abuse, or just women in general. I did really appreciate Christianity Today's president, Timothy Dalrymple, said, quote, "We want to practice the transparency and accountability we preach," end quote. "It is imperative we be above reproach on these matters. If we're falling short of what love requires of us, we want to know and we want to do better," end quote. And I mean, that's really good. If they start living that out, that will be really good. And that will be a sign that there is repentance for this and there is change. And I think that trust can slowly be built back. But again, this sort of problem is going to impact everything the magazine did for those over a dozen years that these guys were tolerated and covered up for. And actually, it's really interesting. I came across, let's see, Justin Taylor over at, oh no, what did I do? Justin Taylor, Between Two Worlds on Twitter. Uh-oh, sorry y'all. I'm trying to click between tweets and I'm messing things up here. But he shared this quote from Gali Mark Gali, back in, I want to say October 2021. And Gali is kind of bloviating, for lack of a better word, about his time at Christianity Today. I guess, I don't know when he left the magazine. This was clearly after it. But he says back when he was the managing editor of Christianity Today and then editor-in-chief, for example, he says that the magazine did not take a stand in the complementarian or egalitarianism debate. But we rarely, if ever, published an article that endorsed complementarianism. So they're not taking a stand, but their private views or what's going on in private is affecting what they choose to publish, what they choose to put out there. And then he goes on again. Then there was the 6-day creation/evolution debate, in which, again, we said we took no stand, but try to find an article in the last 3 decades that argued for or assumed 6-day creation. Now, I don't, they can publish what they want, right? My problem here is that he admits, we said we took no stand, but really we did this. We said we were, impartial, but really we were this way. And so that's really manipulative. And this is something that you're going to see, like if you research abusers, if you get to know abusers, you're going to start to notice that a lot of them are really, really manipulative and deceptive, and they will mess with your head. And so this statement that Gali released apparently back in October 2021 really is consistent with the picture that Daniel Silliman is painting in this article. And let me see if I can pull up. Scrolling through. This is a long article. Okay, this is Andrea Palapontdilli. Sorry. She says, quote, she's the online managing editor. She says, quote, "There is a physical fear with sexual harassment, but the bigger fear for me is I'm afraid of the diminishment and disrespect. It's a threat to my professionalism, and that is fundamentally a threat to my ability to flourish and trust that I can be respected as a woman at Christianity Today," end quote. And that's really what it comes down to when we deal with any kind of an abuser in our midst, whether they be a verbal abuser, psychological abuser, or a full-blown sexual predator. And I'm noting that later on in this article, was convicted for, I believe, soliciting sex from a minor. So, these are patterns, guys. This is when we start to see this pattern where, someone will start by saying inappropriate, icky, weird things that just kind of make you awkward, but you can't quite nail down, like, did he really mean to say that? Maybe, maybe he slipped something into his coffee and he was just a little slap happy, and, or maybe he's just really tired. Maybe he's in a weird mood. Maybe things are weird at home and he's just, kind of speaking out of turn. We make all these excuses in our heads for those little awkward comments, but then you see they escalate. Then, for example, in this article, they'll talk about the guy came into the office and shut the door and said all this weird stuff or touched her inappropriately. And then it's like, oh, then it's my word against his. And, he's the boss. If I report him, what's he going to do? Is anyone going to believe me? Is he going to get fired? Is he going to get dealt with? Or am I going to have to spend the next however long it takes to get a new job, working alongside a guy that is making me feel awkward and anxious, and a bunch of people that don't believe me and are, making me feel incredibly uncomfortable. So this is a very real fear, and that's actually the fear that abusers really use. They leverage that against you because, and Casey Huff at Copperfield SBC was just talking about this on Sunday. You threaten someone's reputation, that's a big deal. He was talking about the commandment not to bear false witness against your neighbor. That's a commandment that abusers break all the time, because if they abuse you, they behave inappropriately towards you or in front of you, what's going to happen, and this is going to happen, is as soon as you start talking about it, they're going to blackball you. And they're going to slander you. And they're going to start spreading rumors about you. Oh, and I've had this happen before, like a bunch of times. Oh, Jennifer, she's, I think she might be a little crazy. I think she might be a liar. Jennifer told me in a prayer request that she's having mental health issues. And oh gosh, I hope she's okay. And so abusers, particularly narcissistic or psychopathic abusers, and I think because we have the element of sexual assault, solicitation of a minor by talk, and he is actually now a registered sex offender, I would say that there is definitely an element of psychopathy here. So the difference is narcissists they're very self-absorbed, right? They're very arrogant, pompous. You may notice that they kind of treat other people more as pawns in a game rather than equals. Everything kind of has to be all about them. If you complain about the way that they've treated you, they're like, oh, how could you do this to me? And so, that's a narcissist, and narcissists are very prone to gossip. They're very prone to slander. But then when you have the psychopathic element in there, basically what that means is that this person has no moral boundaries. They technically know right from wrong, and we know that because they only abuse in secret when nobody's looking, but they don't actually care. So the only reason that they might obey the law is if they think they're going to get caught. It's not because doing something bad makes them feel guilty or shameful or da-da-da-da-da. They might feel shameful a little bit. Like anything, psychopathy and narcissism, they exist on spectrums, right? We're probably all a little bit narcissistic in a way. Instagram is proof of that. But when we're talking about someone who is willing to prey upon children, that is a whole separate level. And of course, use fear and threats, or the implication of threats, to silence victims. We're talking about people who have hardened their hearts, who have calloused their souls, who have a less than healthy amount of shame and conscience. Their conscience has been muted. And I like to use the example of a callus, like on your hand or your foot. If you rub it enough, you're going to develop a callus and you'll kind of lose feeling. It's kind of tough. Abusers do the same thing with their souls. They keep committing sins. They start with little sins. They build up and they do these sins over and over and over. So you've got chronic unrepented sin. Chronic unrepented sin, you guys. So this isn't a one-time offense. This is a pattern of behavior. And they build up those sins, and they build up those sins in the same way that an alcoholic develops a tolerance for alcohol. They start with Bud Light, they build up and build up and build up until before you know it, they're chugging a whole bottle of whiskey and they're fine. Or drug addicts do the same thing. They may start with a small, less harmful product like weed, and then they build up and they build up and they build up, and then before you know it, they are on meth or something horrible like that. So sin acts the same way. And when we talk about sexual sin, or any kind of sin involving power and control dynamics, there is an element that is very similar to addiction. So these abusers get a kind of high out of controlling and manipulating and frightening others. And we see that in Gali's own statement about how we took this stand publicly, but in reality, we did this over here. This was a power thing for him. That's what it sounds like. So, again, I mean, just very disappointing. And I feel for these women. This one woman says that she was, her whole body tensed up and she wanted to throw up when she was approached by this guy. And I know that feeling, and, or just a guy staring at her in an inappropriate, kind of ogling her. So I feel for these women, but it's the blast radius of this is what really concerns me. And, I just, particularly for abuse survivors, and when I say abuse survivors, I'm talking primarily about people who've experienced abuse personally. But also, if you're the parent of a child or the spouse of someone who was abused, or a sibling of someone who was abused, this is shattering. This is devastating. And so how do we cope with this? How do we move forward with this? And I would just really encourage you to look at the Old Testament. I know that probably sounds kind of pedantic of me, but pedantic means bookish. It probably sounds kind of nerdy of me, but I would just really encourage you to look at the Old Testament, characters like Saul in particular, or Amnon. There were quite thoroughly wicked men who rose to power in Israel. They were leaders among God's people in the same way that publishers and editors and authors and pastors, and you get the picture, are leaders today. And yet they were evil. And it's easy for us to think, oh my gosh, this pastor, like I know Ravi Zacharias, his fall was devastating for many, many people. And our faith isn't in these guys. It's not. Our faith is in Jesus Christ. And it doesn't, I hope Christianity today recovers from this and flourishes and goes on to be a beacon of hope and ministry to the world. But even in theory, if Christianity today went out of business and stopped publication tomorrow, Jesus Christ would still be the Son of God. We would still be Christians. There would still be hope for the world. Okay, so I think when these things shake us, and I admit this shook me, it's a good reminder that we need to not place our hope in the people and the institutions of this world, because they will fall. They will disappoint us. That's what the Old Testament is all about, right? Everybody's looking for the Messiah, because God promised Eve that he would give her an offspring who would crush Satan's head. And so every time there's a new baby boy born in Israel, people are wondering, is this the Messiah? Is this him over here? Is Saul the Messiah? Is David the Messiah? Is Solomon the Messiah? And then you find out, oh, nope, he fell into sin. Best case scenario, I think there's like one guy maybe who he walked with the Lord and then he died. So it's like, obviously that wasn't the Messiah, because the Messiah is not going to die. He's God. So the Old Testament is all about, is this the one? And then, it's not. We have to keep waiting. And I feel like we're kind of in a similar season now. Jesus came at the cross, he died, but now we're waiting for him to come back. And so, we keep looking for people to point us to Jesus. We keep looking for people to be an example, to be a prophet, to be an apostle, to be a leader. But what we need is Jesus to come back. That's what we need. And so I would encourage you, if you are shaken like I was, don't let this discourage you. Don't let this cause you to lose hope. Use it to remind you that your hope is not in people. It's not in brilliant authors or theologians or well-spoken pastors or anything that glimmers and shines in this world. Your hope is in Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ is still the Son of God. The Lord is in his holy temple. May all the world keep silent before him. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this encouraged you and maybe helped you think through this issue a little bit. And to everyone at Christianity Today, currently, formerly, and everyone just kind of just affected by this, shaken by this, I'm praying for you. Let's pray for each other, and let's help each other build a better church, because our kids deserve better than this.